This is a full, all-statistics archetype evaluation built from the complete analytical stack that has been constructed. Quarterback performance is examined across multiple interacting dimensions: depth of target, short, intermediate, and deep passing, measured by expected points; added per dropback and completion percentage over expected with pressure context; timing, quick versus long developing plays, using expected points added per dropback and time to throw; stress response, performance under pressure versus no pressure, including efficiency collapse; defensive aggression, blitz versus no blitz situations and the resulting efficiency changes; offensive leverage, play action versus no play action efficiency and play action lift; and target location, wide, slot, and tight targets, measured by expected points added per dropback to define location identity. Using these layers together allows each archetype to be defined, interpreted through the numbers, populated with quarterbacks who fit the profile, and then refined further by identifying whether each quarterback is primarily wide-driven, slot-driven, or tight window-driven. The first and largest group is Archetype 1, the scheme-protected operator, which includes Drake May, Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Jacoby Brissett, Brock Purdy, C.J. Stroud, Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts, Tyler Show, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. What the full statistical stack shows for this archetype is simple but powerful. When the offense provides clear answers, these quarterbacks consistently convert them into value. Their success is not dependent on improvisation or chaos, but on structure being intact. From a depth perspective, the intermediate passing game is the engine for this group. Their median expected points added per dropback on intermediate throws is the strongest of any archetype, meaning they consistently extract value from the most difficult and most important area of the field. Deep passing exists as a constraint rather than the primary driver. It matters enough to keep defenses honest, but is not required on every drive. The short passing game is generally functional rather than dominant, serving as a connective tissue rather than a true efficiency spike. From a timing standpoint, these quarterbacks are efficient enough in the quick game to keep the offense on schedule, but they do not rely exclusively on it. Longer developing plays appear strategically rather than constantly, most often attached to play-action concepts or dictated by coverage structure. The offense is not rhythm-fragile, but neither is it reckless. Under pressure, expected points added per dropback declines, as it does for every quarterback. But the defining trait of this archetype is that the offense remains operable. There is no consistent fall-off-a-cliff pattern. Drives may slow down, but they do not routinely implode. Similarly, against the blitz, these quarterbacks tend to be neutral to slightly positive in efficiency relative to league averages. Blitzing does not become a reliable solution for defenses, because these quarterbacks can still find answers without panicking or forcing low-percentage throws. Play action adds meaningful value for many quarterbacks in this group, producing noticeable efficiency lift, but they are not play action dependent. When play action is removed, they can still function through timing, spacing, and intermediate rhythm. This is a critical distinction between being enhanced by scheme and being dependent on scheme. Defensively, opponents attempting to stop this archetype focus on removing intermediate windows through match coverage rules, robber rotations, and late post-snap picture changes. The goal is to force longer developing throws while keeping pressure contained, rather than creating chaos. Defenses also attempt to compress games into short-only drives by eliminating explosives and easy middle-of-field access. Viewed through a Chargers-specific lens, Justin Herbert's consistent placement in this archetype and his repeated appearance in the top tier across multiple modeling runs carries clear implications. When the offensive structure provides answers through formation, route spacing, and protection rules, Herbert reliably converts them. His downturns are not driven by an inability to process, but by being forced into high-stress, long-developing situations where pressure frequency overwhelms the structure of the play rather than the quarterback's cognition. Archetype 2. The timing-first survivor includes Trevor Lawrence, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, Aaron Rodgers, Tua Tagovailoa, Baker Mayfield, Jackson Dart, Geno Smith, Michael Penix Jr., Spencer Rattler, and Joe Flacco. The complete statistical profile for this group shows an offense that lives on answers arriving on time, with efficiency closely tied to rhythm. When timing is preserved, these quarterbacks can function at a high level. When stress is introduced, the rhythm of the offense breaks down more quickly than it does for scheme-protected operators. From a depth perspective, quarterbacks in this archetype are capable of producing value on intermediate and deep throws, but their value creation is noticeably more fragile. When forced to win in difficult situations, such as tight coverage windows, late downs, or extended plays, expected points added per dropback compresses significantly. This indicates that their success is less about sustained difficulty solving and more about staying within the intended structure of the play. Timing is the defining characteristic of this archetype. Quick game efficiency, measured by expected points. Added per dropback on throws released within approximately 2.5 seconds, matters more to these quarterbacks than it does for scheme-protected operators. When quick answers are removed through tight man coverage, simulated pressure, or late post-snap rotations, overall efficiency declines sharply. The offense becomes less capable of adapting once the first read is disrupted. Under pressure and against the blitz, penalties are generally more severe for this group. This is not always because the quarterback lacks ability, but because the offensive systems supporting these players are less robust against disruption. When protection is stressed or defensive pictures change late, the offense struggles to restabilize. Play action serves as an important stabilizer for many quarterbacks in this archetype because it manufactures timing and leverage. In play action environments, efficiency often improves materially. When play action is removed and the quarterback is forced into pure drop-back rhythm, the offense tends to become less stable and more error-prone. Defensively, opponents attacking timing-first survivors focus on disrupting the quick game. Press coverage, collisions on slot receivers, and muddying the first read are common tools. Simulated pressure and creeper pressures are especially effective, as they present the appearance of a blitz, while only rushing 4 defenders and dropping additional help into the middle of the field. The goal is to force second reaction throws, where holding the ball longer leads to a pressure tax and declining efficiency. Archetype 3. The Blitz-Resistant hybrid includes Bryce Young, J.J. McCarthy, and Cam Ward. From a defensive game planning perspective, this group is uniquely challenging because blitzing does not automatically solve them, even though they may be inconsistent in other areas. The statistical profile suggests that while their overall efficiency can fluctuate, they are often insulated against the most obvious aggressive defensive answer. Against the blitz specifically, these quarterbacks tend to suffer a smaller efficiency penalty than expected, given their baseline performance. They are frequently trained or forced into rapid outlets, checkdowns, or defined throws that reduce the immediate damage of pressure. As a result, blitzing them does not consistently generate the expected negative outcomes, even if it disrupts the original play design. However, This resistance to blitz does not mean they are immune to stress. Under pressure more broadly, and especially when forced into deeper drops or longer developing plays, expected points added per dropback can still collapse. The key distinction is that blitz itself is not the solution. Defenses are better served winning with coverage discipline rather than raw heat, maintaining structural integrity while forcing these quarterbacks into long down situations. The objective is to remove easy answers and make them prove they can win repeatedly without freebies, rather than expecting pressure alone to break the offense. Archetype 4. The pressure and blitz-fragile vertical quarterback applies to a single player. Kirk Cousins. The complete statistical profile places him in a distinct category, where overall offensive function is highly sensitive to stress. In clean environments, specifically situations without blitz pressure and without immediate interior disruption, the offense can appear stable and productive. Expected points. Added per dropback in no pressure and no blitz situations is functional enough to sustain drives. However, once stress is introduced through pressure or blitz, efficiency collapses sharply. The drop in expected points added per dropback under these conditions is among the steepest observed across all archetypes, indicating that discomfort rather than coverage complexity is the primary failure point. Defensively, the approach against this archetype is straightforward and consistent. The objective is to force the quarterback off his spot through interior pressure, while pairing that disruption with late coverage rotation. Interior push prevents comfortable platform throws, and late rotations remove pre-snap certainty. Together, these elements break the offensive plan by denying clean rhythm and forcing the offense to operate without its preferred timing structure. Layered on top of the 4 macro archetypes is the target location overlay, which assigns every quarterback a location identity based on which target type produces the highest expected points added per dropback. This overlay is critical because it determines where a defense should steer the quarterback, not just how it should apply pressure. The first target location subtype is the perimeter isolation engine, defined by quarterbacks whose best efficiency comes from throws to wide targets. These quarterbacks are built to punish single high coverage structures and win outside the numbers through isolation routes. Defenses typically respond by shifting to 2 high safety shells, squatting cornerbacks on outside routes, and funneling throws back inside toward help defenders. The second subtype is the middle-of-the-field rhythm engine, where slot target efficiency dominates. These quarterbacks are at their best when operating through slot leverage, crossers, and middle-of-the-field rhythm throws. Defensive responses focus on match coverage rules, robber safety looks, collisions on slot receivers, and late post-snap rotations designed to disrupt leverage and timing over the middle. The third subtype is the anticipation or tight window engine, defined by quarterbacks whose highest efficiency comes from tight window throws. These players can win without separation by throwing with anticipation and precise ball placement. Against this subtype, pure coverage is often insufficient. Defenses instead rely on pressure timing combined with disguise, aiming to disrupt the quarterback's internal clock rather than simply removing space. The final subtype is the balanced location operator, where no single target location clearly dominates efficiency. These quarterbacks are more difficult to steer because they can function across wide, slot, and tight targets without a dramatic drop in performance. Defensive game plans against them must rely more heavily on macro stress levers, such as pressure management and coverage disguise, rather than simple spatial steering. This target location overlay matters because it provides the defensive steering wheel. 2 quarterbacks may both qualify as scheme-protected operators at the macro level, But if one is perimeter-driven while the other is slot-driven, the required defensive game plan is fundamentally different. Understanding where a quarterback derives value is as important as understanding how he handles pressure, and the combination of macro archetype plus location identity is what turns abstract analysis into executable defensive strategy. Archetype 1. The scheme-protected operator is defined by a quarterback who wins when offensive structure consistently provides answers. Quarterbacks in this category, such as Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, Josh Allen, C.J. Stroud, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, and Brock Purdy, thrive when formations, route spacing, and protection rules create clear reads. What does not work defensively against this archetype is random blitzing, static zone coverage shells, or soft-off coverage that lacks leverage. These approaches tend to give the quarterback exactly what he wants: predictable answers and exploitable space. What can work instead is systematically removing intermediate passing answers and forcing the quarterback to hold the ball without providing an obvious blitz indicator. The primary vulnerability of this archetype is answer removal rather than chaos. The goal is not to overwhelm the quarterback with aggression, but to quietly erase his first and second options and force extended processing. Archetype 2. The timing first survivor describes quarterbacks whose offensive success is driven by rhythm and first-read execution. Examples include Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, and Geno Smith. Against this archetype, defensive strategies such as vanilla zone coverage, soft cushions at the line of scrimmage, or simply rushing 4 defenders and hoping for pressure are ineffective. These approaches allow the offense to stay on schedule and preserve timing. What does work is disrupting the first approximately 2.5 seconds of the play, either by challenging releases, colliding receivers, or altering post-snap pictures. Forcing second reaction throws, where the quarterback must move off his initial read and hold the ball longer, creates a sharp efficiency decline. The primary vulnerability of this archetype is timing disruption. Once rhythm is broken, the offense struggles to re-stabilize. Archetype 3. The blitz-resistant hybrid includes quarterbacks such as Bryce Young, J.J. McCarthy, and Cam Ward. The defining trait of this group is that blitzing does not automatically solve them, even though their overall efficiency can be volatile. They are often coached or structurally guided into rapid outlets, checkdowns, or clearly defined throws that blunt the immediate impact of extra rushers. As a result, blitz pressure alone does not consistently generate negative outcomes. The primary vulnerability here is not aggression, but coverage discipline paired with patience. Defenses must avoid overcommitting, maintain structural integrity, and force these quarterbacks to sustain efficiency across long drives, rather than relying on quick fixes. Archetype 4. The pressure and blitz-fragile quarterback is characterized by a dramatic efficiency collapse under stress. Kirk Cousins is the clearest example of this archetype. In clean environments, without pressure and without blitz, the offense can appear functional and controlled. However, once pressure or blitz is introduced, expected points added per dropback declines sharply. The primary vulnerability for this archetype is any form of clean pressure. Interior disruption combined with late coverage rotation is often sufficient to break the offensive plan and force mistakes. After identifying the macro archetype, the next step is to apply the steering wheel, which is based on target location. This layer tells the defense where to push the quarterback spatially. By determining whether a quarterback derives the most efficiency from wide targets, slot targets, or tight window throws, defenses can decide whether to funnel throws outside, remove the middle of the field, or disrupt timing regardless of separation. This steering mechanism is what translates archetype identification into actionable defensive game planning, ensuring that pressure and coverage choices align with how a quarterback actually creates value. A wide-driven quarterback, also referred to as a perimeter isolation engine, is identified when expected points added per dropback on throws to wide targets exceeds efficiency on both slot and tight window throws. This signal indicates that the quarterback relies on receiver separation and outside leverage to generate value, often punishing single high coverage and isolated cornerbacks. The defensive steering goal against this type of quarterback is to force throws inside. By funneling targets toward the middle of the field and away from the boundary, the defense removes the quarterback's preferred isolation environment and increases the difficulty of each throw. A slot-driven quarterback, known as a middle-of-the-field rhythm engine, is identified when expected points added per dropback on slot targets is clearly dominant. This profile indicates that the quarterback wins through leverage, crossers, option routes, and timing-based throws over the middle of the field. The defensive steering goal here is to remove the middle of the field entirely. Defenses do this by using match coverage rules, robber safety looks, collisions on slot receivers, and late post-snap rotations that disrupt leverage and rhythm. A tight window quarterback, or anticipation engine, is identified when expected points added per dropback on tight window throws is the strongest of the three target locations. For this type of quarterback, separation does not meaningfully determine success. Timing and anticipation do. The defensive steering goal is therefore not to remove space, but to disrupt timing. This is accomplished through disguised coverage, late movement, and pressure that interferes with the quarterback's internal clock, rather than simply closing throwing lanes. A balanced location quarterback shows no clear efficiency leader among wide, slot, or tight targets. Because no single steering direction reliably degrades performance, defenses must rely more heavily on macro stress mechanisms, such as pressure management, coverage disguise, and situational leverage rather than spatial funneling. These quarterbacks are harder to steer and require a more holistic defensive approach. After identifying both the macro archetype and the target location steering preference, the third and most important step is choosing the stress lever that the defense can realistically execute. This is not theoretical. It directly informs what defensive calls should be made on the field. The first major decision point is whether to use simulated pressure or true blitz. Simulated pressure should be used when the quarterback is a scheme-protected operator, when the quarterback is driven primarily by wide or slot targets, or when the defense's defensive backs cannot reliably survive man coverage. Simulated pressure works because it removes hot route answers, forces post-snap processing, and preserves coverage integrity by rushing four defenders while presenting the illusion of greater pressure. This approach is especially effective against high-processing quarterbacks such as Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, C.J. Stroud, and Brock Purdy. Against these players, simulated pressure is consistently the most effective answer because it stresses cognition and structure without surrendering coverage control. True blitz should be used when the quarterback fits the timing first survivor archetype or the pressure and blitz fragile archetype, and when the defense is confident it can cover hot routes. This approach works because it immediately breaks offensive rhythm and forces the quarterback into off-platform throws before timing can reestablish itself. Rather than testing processing patience, true blitzing attacks the first 2 seconds of the play and denies the quarterback the ability to operate on schedule. This lever is most effective against quarterbacks such as Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, and Kirk Cousins, whose efficiency declines sharply when early rhythm is disrupted and pressure arrives without ambiguity. The second major stress lever is the choice between press coverage and off coverage. Press coverage should be used when the quarterback is a timing-first survivor or a slot-driven quarterback, and when wide receivers rely heavily on release timing to create leverage. Pressing works because it eliminates the first read, forces a longer time to throw, and effectively converts a timing-based quarterback into a pressure-based quarterback. By disrupting releases at the line of scrimmage, the defense delays route development and increases the likelihood that pressure will arrive before the quarterback can reset. This approach is particularly effective against quarterbacks such as Tua Tagovailoa, Geno Smith, Trevor Lawrence, and Bo Nix. Off coverage, including bail techniques, should be used when the quarterback is perimeter-driven, when wide receivers win primarily through physicality rather than timing, and when the defensive objective is to funnel throws rather than contest them aggressively. Off coverage works by forcing underneath throws, limiting explosive plays, and encouraging the offense to sustain long drives rather than scoring quickly. By keeping the ball in front of the defense, this approach reduces volatility and allows rally and tackle principles to take effect. Off or bail coverage is most effective against quarterbacks such as Josh Allen, Jordan Love, and Matthew Stafford, who are most dangerous when allowed to attack isolated matchups outside the numbers. The third major defensive stress lever is the choice between robber coverage and quarters coverage, which directly affects how the middle of the field is controlled. Robber or middle-of-the-field closed coverage should be used when the quarterback is slot-driven or when intermediate expected points added per dropback is the dominant source of offensive efficiency. This approach works because it removes crossing routes and in-breaking throws that fuel rhythm passing, forcing the quarterback to either throw to the boundary or check the ball down underneath. By closing the middle of the field, robber coverage denies the quarterback leverage-based answers and compresses the offense into lower efficiency options. This lever is particularly effective against quarterbacks such as Justin Herbert, C.J. Stroud, Dak Prescott, and Joe Burrow, whose intermediate and middle-of-the-field efficiency drives a significant portion of their value. Quarters coverage, including match-based quarters concepts, should be used when the quarterback is perimeter-driven or when deep expected points added per dropback is the primary offensive weapon. This approach works because it allows defenders to keep their eyes on routes, pass off verticals, and limit isolation shots outside the numbers without surrendering explosive plays. Quarters coverage preserves coverage integrity against vertical threats while still allowing defenders to react downhill. It is most effective against quarterbacks such as Josh Allen, Jordan Love, and Matthew Stafford, who are most dangerous when allowed to attack one-on-one matchups on the perimeter. The fourth defensive stress lever is the decision to bracket the slot receiver or funnel throws outside, which directly targets a quarterback's preferred source of rhythm. Bracketing the slot should be used when expected points added per dropback on slot targets exceeds efficiency on wide targets, and when the quarterback relies on middle-of-the-field rhythm to sustain drives. This approach works by removing leverage throws over the middle and forcing the quarterback into longer, more difficult boundary reads that typically require tighter ball placement and greater protection. Bracketing the slot is especially effective against quarterbacks such as Justin Herbert, most notably C.J. Stroud, and Tua Tagovailoa, whose efficiency is heavily tied to slot-based timing and leverage. Funneling throws outside should be used when the quarterback is wide-driven and when the defense's cornerbacks can survive one-on-one coverage. This strategy works by forcing the quarterback into lower percentage isolation, throws along the boundary, while reducing yards after the catch. By keeping the ball outside and in front of leverage defenders, the defense limits explosive plays and increases the likelihood of incompletions or contested catches. This approach is most effective against quarterbacks such as Josh Allen, Jordan Love, and Matthew Stafford, whose perimeter efficiency drops when forced to repeatedly win in isolated, low-margin situations. Putting it all together, the value of the archetype framework becomes clearest when it is applied to specific quarterbacks. Take Justin Herbert as an example. At the macro level, Herbert fits the scheme-protected operator archetype. His steering profile shows a strong reliance on slot targets and intermediate throws, meaning much of his value comes from rhythm-based answers over the middle of the field rather than constant perimeter isolation. The correct defensive stress package against Herbert therefore emphasizes simulated pressure rather than true blitzing, paired with press coverage on slot receivers and collision techniques at the line of scrimmage to disrupt releases. Coverage should lean toward robber or match-based quarters concepts, which remove intermediate middle-of-the-field answers without giving away pre-snap tells. Soft zone coverage should be avoided, as it allows Herbert to operate comfortably within structure, and zero blitzing should also be avoided, as it provides clear answers and accelerates his processing. The overarching defensive goal is to remove intermediate middle-of-the-field answers while forcing Herbert to hold the ball, all without signaling where pressure or coverage help is coming from. A contrasting example is Tua Tagovailoa. At the macro level, Tagovailoa fits the timing-first survivor archetype, and his steering profile is clearly slot-driven, meaning his efficiency depends heavily on rhythm throws and leverage-based routes over the middle. The correct defensive stress package against him is more aggressive. True blitzing is effective because it immediately breaks timing and forces off-platform throws. This should be paired with press coverage inside, particularly on slot receivers, to disrupt release timing and remove first-read answers. Robber coverage, which closes the middle of the field, further compounds the disruption by eliminating the throws that fuel Tagovailoa's rhythm. Quarters coverage is less effective in this context, as it preserves too much middle-of-the-field space, and soft-off coverage should be avoided because it allows timing to remain intact. The final takeaway is that defensive success depends on respecting a clear hierarchy. First, the macro archetype tells you what kind of quarterback you are facing and how he generally responds to structure and stress. Second, target location tells you where to steer him spatially, toward or away from the perimeter, the slot, or tight windows. Third, the stress lever tells you what your defense can realistically execute in terms of pressure, coverage, and disguise. When these three layers are applied together, you gain something that most teams do not have explicitly: a repeatable, evidence-based method for deciding how to defend each quarterback, grounded in how that quarterback actually creates value rather than in generic tendencies or intuition.